was given the green light to get school credit for taking classes in Atlanta, and at the time that was mostly what we would call method acting. I sort of gravitated away from that the older I got, and moved towards a more imagination-based approach to acting. Method is great, but if you're doing comedic art or something probably farcical or something, it's not a whole lot of reason to get in touch with your own inner pain. Bigger, faster, funnier is the rule when you're doing that kind of thing, and that's what I really always loved most on stage, was to make an audience laugh. So I did a lot of theater in Atlanta, started doing a lot of theater throughout the Southeast. It was not until sometime later, in my 30s, when I wound up getting into some film work. And about the same time, I was really starting to move more into directing and producing theater as well. So in that time, those decades since first stepping up onto the Birds, I've done about 300 plays. I've been in about a dozen different union film projects, feature film, television. Did a lot of animation in the late 90s and the early noughts. And that was very, very satisfying work. I really loved doing the voice acting work. English language translations of mostly Japanese animation. And then wound up in New York for a couple of years and got to do some just amazing projects in New York. And that's where I was when I got the call in 2008 that my dad had been diagnosed with bone marrow cancer. And I came back to Atlanta to be there and take care of him and look out for my mom. And he passed a year later, and I've pretty much stuck around here mostly ever since then to be here to help with my mom, help my sister and her family. So that's something that I've always really been very grateful for. That Second Life filled in a huge creative gap in my life that was created when I left New York. But the fact that we can all be here together and work together in a creative way and do it for this cause, it just really has been a blessing to have this to fall back on, to still have that creative outlet and that social communicative outlet as well. So that's been a real blessing. You get to work with some just incredible actors here in Second Life. Thanks to Saffia, who kind of introduced me to all of that. It's sort of why I got into Second Life in the beginning. When I first heard about it, my first thought was, well, maybe this will be a platform that I can do some work as an actor, and that was 2006. And at that time, the things that one could do with the avatar was pretty limited. And I moved away from that idea of using this as a platform for acting and fell in love with building. And it wasn't too long after that the fair was born, and then interestingly, all this time later, it's gone. I'm not a mesh maker, so I stand in awe of what these great builders are capable of today. I was a halfway decent prim wrangler, but there's no way I could keep up with what these extraordinary world makers do. So as time has gone on, I've moved away from that aspect of it and wound up coming back around to using Second Life for exactly what I came here to do in the first place. So it's been a sort of full circle journey that brings me back to Fantasy Faire. Hello, Wildstar. And Chantal, thank you so much. Chantal Harvey here is the reason why we get to have this Fantasy Faire Film Festival. Just so wonderful, all the things that they've been doing, both showing short fantasy films made in Second Life and also having some really terrific interviews and discussion groups around that subject. It's just a fascinating thing to be able to use a virtual world to create stories and film them and then share them with a broader audience. I think that's great that we can break down the wall between the virtual world and the physical world. So thank you, Chantal, for making the new film festival part of the fair. I really think it's been a huge, huge success, and look forward to seeing how we can continue to grow it over the years to come. Yeah, big applause for Chantal, indeed. And the whole LitFest team, too. What an incredible group of people. Just incredible.
Okay, we're 3/4 of the way there.
All right. Zizri, my fine avian friend. Thank you for being here. Michelle and Anna, welcome. Hello, Mary. How good to see you. And Asia Connell, wow, gosh. Asia Connell, one of the founding sponsors of the fair. Asia, nobody had a clue who we were. Nobody had any reason to think that we could actually pull this thing off back in 2009, and Asia was one of the people with her group, Fantasy Faire, who really took a chance and came on board as one of our very, very first sponsors that first year, and is a big part of why this is all here. Had a lot of people not rolled the dice and given us invested faith in us that we could do this, then Fantasy Faire wouldn't have gotten started. We wouldn't have grown to what we are today. So people like Asia Connell, who were really there at the very beginning, just what a debt of gratitude we owe to all of you. Oh, Michelle Hyacinth. Judy, yeah, that's right. The first time I got a chance to talk with really most of you guys was 07. I think that's right. Talking about, I believe it was the relay weekend build that Lauren Thibault and I created called Anatomica. And I think that was the first time I met and spoke with Saffia and Elric as part of the Designing Worlds. A long time ago, wasn't it? Holy cow. Yeah, that was fun. That was a really neat build. It was all based on the film Fantastic Voyage, where they shrink the people down into microscopic size and they go into a little submarine and zip through. Some poor fella, I can't remember who he was, but to save his life.
That board looks a bit sort of subdued. It should be showing things more brightly. Let me see if I can improve on that.
And Mary Layton, hello Mary. Give Saffia a little bit of time here. If you guys have any questions you want me to speak to, feel free to shout out. Doesn't have to be about my work as an actor, just anything you want to know about the fair or anything. Just feel free to shout out in local. We'll give Saffia some time to pull things together here.
What to start with? Is everyone else seeing this board a bit sort of subdued and blurry? A bit grey? Not quite sure. There's some sort of filter on it.
Ketsui and Michelle both saying it's clear in their view.
Let me just
it might help to just go to midday. That might help just in general. Control Shift Y.
And
Oh, midnight is even better idea. Good idea. What?
Okay, we may have to live with a slightly grey board.
We can do that.
Okay. Hello everyone, and welcome to this special conversation. I've been sort of listening while I got the slides up, and I heard Zander telling the story of how he began. But I'd like to start by asking a question, because we're going to explore Zander's real life and second life acting career. And I'd like to start by asking, Zander, when did you first think that you would when did you get the passion to be an actor? When did you know that acting was what you wanted to do? How old were you?
I don't even remember a time when I wasn't aware of that. It started really at family gatherings at Christmas time, and it actually started Thanksgiving. I was the oldest of 16 grandchildren, and on Thanksgiving I would gather them all, we would eat, and then while the adults sat around in the family business and talked about boring adult stuff, I'd rally my cousins around, and we would go off and we would write and create a Christmas play. And then between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we'd get together a few times and we'd rehearse it. And then on Christmas Eve, when we were all gathered again, we would do this Christmas play that we'd created for the family. And of course, being the egotist that I was even at that age, I would write myself the best part and direct and produce the whole thing. But the amount of positive reinforcement that came from my family around that, some of them have sort of scratched their heads. They're good Southern, good old folk. Most of them didn't really understand why I would become an actor, why I would want to do something like that. And I just said, well, look, you've got nobody but yourselves to blame, because how could you be, 10 years old and get that much positive reinforcement from the whole family and not want to go on to do that? So I guess probably 7 or 8 is when we started doing that, and did it every year until I was old enough that my life took me away from home, and it was harder to get back for Christmas time. So that's actually where it started, was just in my grandfather's farmhouse in rural northeastern Georgia.
I think that's a great way to get started. And so you actually had no doubts it was going to be that, and so by the age of 15 you were getting school credits for it.
That's right, yeah. And there was not much of a drama program at my high school. I went to school at a very impoverished part of this part of the state. There wasn't really they didn't do plays, they didn't do any kind of drama club or anything like that. And in some ways that's actually been beneficial. There are a lot of really bad high school drama clubs, and a lot of actors come out of those with some pretty bad habits. And I really didn't do anything in terms of high school plays. By the time I was old enough to really know that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it on a wider stage, I was going back and forth to Atlanta and doing shows in the city. And got very lucky, got extremely lucky. I fell in with some people who really took me under their wing and looked out for me. I was too young. I was way too young to be in all of that, but fortunately I had some people really watching out for me, which made it both possible for me to do that and also made it safe for me to do that. I always felt very fortunate that I had the experience that I did, even in those high school years. Just getting out there and just saying, okay, well, if this is what we're going to do, then let's just go out and start doing it.
What sort of roles were you playing back then?
I always wound up getting I am tall, I am thin, and I am angular. That to any casting director, that says villain. And I spent most of my theater career playing just despicable characters of one variety or another, and then that fell over into the film work as well. I got a lot of really great bad guy roles, and it is, it's the most fun. There's something we did a production in college of The Scarlet Pimpernel, and I played Chauvelin, the agent of the Revolution. And I mean, just a horrible, horrible human being. And I said there's just something incredibly therapeutic about being able to come together every night and work with a group of soulmates, just dear, dear friends, people who just mean the world to you, and chop all their heads off. That was some pretty great therapy, actually, in those years to get to do that. So there's a lot of that. I guess if I was typecast in anything, it would have been the bad guys and quirky best friends. That sort of became another thing that I fell into doing a lot of as well. I never really was that interested in doing the romantic lead stuff because it's just, the ingenue things, they're just not that interesting. Not much of a challenge to that. Be earnest, be likable, make the audience care whether you have a miserable time or not, so that they will rejoice when you ultimately triumph. And that's, Michelle, a lot of comedy. And I like work that's physical. As an actor on stage, I love doing really physical work, and comedy is extremely physical and extremely percussive too. Comedy is a rhythm. Tragedy, you got a lot of wiggle room. This works, but also this would probably work, and you can kind of ooze your way through it and try different things. But comedy is there's what works. There's the rhythm that gets you to the down beat that gets the laugh, and there's really not a whole lot of wiggle room at all. It's more like choreography. It's more like dance, I would say, and more like music in that it's a rhythm. You got to get that rhythm right. The rule of three, indeed.
So, after Atlanta and the sort of these early roles, what happened next?
Well, when I got out of high school, I didn't actually start college right away. I was working. I was living in Atlanta. I was doing a lot of theater. I was doing a lot of technical theater too. That was something that always really appealed to me. Sometimes I had a hard time relating to actors. They were too abstract. I liked to approach it like a craft, like a discipline. You could learn, you could get better at it. It's not magical. It's something that you get better at by doing. And technicians, just by design, think that way. So I loved hanging out with great set designers and technical directors. I loved working on hanging lights for a show. It's also when I started doing a lot of sound work as well. And I was doing that in Atlanta for about 2 years before I wound up actually enrolling in a college theater program, at which point life became entirely about that and stayed about that for the better part of the next 20 years.
So you went through college, and were you attracted to the idea of moving to the West Coast?
I wasn't. I really like village life. I enjoy a small town setting a lot. I like to have access to the big city and all the great things that it has to offer, but I really like living in smaller communities because I've always been very community oriented, and I think that goes back also to coming from such a large family. So once I found places where I could act, where I could do what I needed to do, it sort of didn't matter to me whether or not it was in Los Angeles or New York or Wilmington, North Carolina, where I did a lot of work. I was fulfilled creatively. I was getting to do work that was interesting, that was challenging. I was getting to work with amazing people. And then Wilmington was also the place where I fell into the film work, which at the time I was there, late 90s, up until 2006. It was, at the beginning especially, it was a real hopping center for film production. The number one center for making movies in the country was Los Angeles. Number 2 was New York. Bizarrely, number 3 was Wilmington, North Carolina. And it is, Maud. It's starting to pick back up again. They've just recently finally got back around to implementing some tax incentives to bring film production back to that state. And so things are starting to pick up there again. But that's where I got into the film work. And, when the time came, I thought, I'm ready to now go try my find my way in one of the really big markets, I went to New York because I wanted to, at that point, I hadn't done theater. I hadn't stopped doing theater, but I had really backed off on doing theater because I was also then working in radio a lot. And that was great, steady paycheck, I loved the work, I'm getting to play with technical toys, doing a lot of interviewing. So once that started, I kind of backed off on doing the theater. But then it got to the point where I'm like, I want to get back to who I am and what I do, and so I thought it's time. I went to New York at that point. I've never actually lived in Los Angeles, though I have many dear friends who are there, and one of my favorite things in the world is to go out and spend some time out there and see the shows and that they're working on and get to spend time with them.
So,
Mary, you're correct. That is exactly what happened.
When you went to in Wilmington, I think you ran a theatre group.
I did. I was artistic director for a couple of years of a company called Theatre Exchange, and they had actually been in business in Los Angeles for about 20 years. And the founder and president of the board of Theatre Exchange moved his family to Wilmington, North Carolina. He came to audition for a show that I was directing at that time, Brian Friel's Translations. And Rob Zappel was his name. Rob and I, he worked with me on that show. I cast him in that show, and we got to be good friends. And he said, look, I've got this company. It's basically exists as far as it's incorporated. We need to change the incorporation to North Carolina, but would you be interested in being artistic director for the company? And I really just had thought the world of him. He was an incredible general contractor, builder, and a great actor and a great director as well. And so that was about a 2-year period there where I was artistic director of Theatre Exchange.
I know that some of your friends from that period have told me how fantastic you were and how much they enjoyed that period and working with you and seeing you work as well.
It was a really exciting time. We just felt we were young and we had energy and we were convinced that art could save the world. And got to do some phenomenal work. And the people there, though most of them I haven't seen now in the better part of a decade. Several of them are here in Second Life now. They followed me in, and my dear friend Christy Grantham has done a lot of work with us. Christy was in The Blackened Mirror. She's a big voice that I rely on for a lot of what we do for Fantasy Faire Radio. A very dear friend of mine there, Michael Brady, has also been involved with a lot of things we've done. My soul brother, Michael Granberry, who I did, the 200 plays I did, easily 2/3 of them were shows that I worked on with Michael, one of the most incredible directors I've ever worked with. And Michael has come in and done some work with us as well as an actor here in SL. So it's nice to be able to have this as a place to bring those people back together again and be able to work together again despite the fact that there's now so much distance in between us.
So, also, you actually starred, well, you didn't star, okay, that's pushing it a bit, but you had a role in one of the biggest productions to come out of Wilmington, I think. TV series.
Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that a series like that, and there were several of them, could be woven into the fabric, the arts fabric of this arts community in a town as small and wonderful as quirky little Wilmington, North Carolina. I only had a day's work on that show, but it was a fun part. I played the art professor with Kitty Holmes. Was taking an art class, and I'm the art director, and James Vanderbeek Dawson comes in and creates a bit of a disruption, and I get to give him a disapproving look and share a kind of a knowing moment, the glance with Katie. That was a lot of fun. Sometimes you're in there for a day and you just think, this is one of the greatest days of my life. And being a day player, it's kind of nice because everybody has such pressure on them, but you're just showing up and you're there to, have good time and connect with these folks, and then at the end of the day, you hang your costume up and you go on. And so that's a day that I'll always remember. Wonderful director, wonderful crew on that as well. And those kids were kids. I mean, they were in their 20s, but, they seemed like kids to me. And now looking back, they seem like toddlers practically. But you would think that they would, even by then the show was already, I think it was second or third season. So it was already becoming, the scale of 90210 and that sort of thing. And I really, when I went into it, I thought, oh my gosh, are they going to be these, they're going to have egos the size of Mount Rushmore. Yeah. But they were not. They were just so humble. And I'm really drawn to people who, despite just a mountain of talent and skill and experience, and you think they're probably going to have big egos, and then you meet them and you find that that couldn't be more incorrect. So that kind of insecurity, that kind of humility, I think there's something very magnetic about that to me. It just speaks of a person who's, I think, doing it for the right reason, not because you think you're all that, but because you hope one day maybe you can be, and you're blown away by the people that you get a chance to work with. I felt that from them. They knew they were on a ride, a heck of a ride, and I think they were also aware that it wouldn't last forever. It was a very good day. It was a good day to be an actor.
So in these day roles, the day parts you were playing, the day acting, you worked with some pretty famous people, I think.
I was doing a Hallmark made-for-TV film, Christmas Story. What is it called? The Christmas Story? I should have pulled my resume out. It's been so long since I've looked at it. I played a sort of, there's not much of a villain in the show, but what villain there was me. Alcoholic, ne'er-do-well nephew of the female lead in the show, who has a very powerful bond and connection to the male lead in the show. The female was Ellen Burstyn. The male was James Earl Jones, and I had scenes with both of them. In fact, I had a scene where I'm center of the frame. James Earl Jones is on my right, and Ellen Burstyn is on my left. And in between takes, at one point I sank down into my knees, and I just kind of had my hands sort of up over my face. And Ellen Burstyn kneels down beside me, and she puts her hand on my shoulder, and she says, "Are you all right?" And I looked up and I said, "Oh, yes, ma'am." I said, I just cannot believe where I am right now." And she said to me, "Darling, no one is here who doesn't deserve to be."
That's great.
And I just thought, wow,
Yeah.
What generosity of spirit, what a pure heart. And my God, that scene there's a scene I have with him, and that's the best acting I will ever do, I have ever done, will ever do. Not because I'm awesome, but because he is so good, he is so powerful that it's the rising tide that lifts all boats. You just are buoyed up on what he is giving you. And a lot of times when they go in for a close-up on you, they will let the other actors in the scene go, and you've just got some script supervisor who's reading their lines. He didn't do that. For the close-ups on me, he could have walked away. He didn't. He said, no, I want to make sure that Scott has, what he needs to respond authentically to this. And so he's off camera doing his lines so that I could do mine in the close-up. And, not everybody does that. We had a 6 a.m. read-through of that script before we started shooting. And, it's a Hallmark made-for-TV movie. Is it Shakespeare? No. It's very sweet, it's very sentimental, but the cynics, and I was one of them still at that time, would probably kind of roll their eyes at how sappy and sentimental it was. And at 6 a.m., we're all bleary-eyed, everybody's half asleep. And James Earl Jones, as we read through that script, he sat there and he wept openly the whole time, not sobbing, but There were tears in his eyes and rolling down his cheeks the entire time. And I thought, my God, you want a goal for yourself as an actor? Be in the business as long as he has and not be so jaded, so cynical that you can't sit there and be emotionally open and feel something at a read-through. That was a huge lesson for me. Like, that's what we should all be striving for. Don't let there's a lot of negativity in film work, mostly because there's so much pressure. There's so much money on the line. Every minute is thousands and thousands of dollars. And that pressure can make some people, and I've seen it, make them cynical. If anybody had a right to be, surely it's him. Great white hope, for heaven's sake. But there he was, just completely connecting emotionally with those words and sharing the fact that he was moved by it without any hint of self-consciousness at all. And I'm not at all. And that was another real lesson for me.
So, when you were in New York, I think you encountered a rather famous playwright.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you thought to ask that. Oh my gosh.
That's a good story.
Yeah, there are a lot of great contemporary playwrights. Even though a lot of people would probably say that, we're kind of in a lull, but the 80s and the 90s were an incredible time for original theater, and one of the most powerful things that was happening during that period was what has come to be known as the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. And a poet, playwright, writer there in Czechoslovakia named Václav Havel had written a wide body of plays, most of which were banned by the state. But productions were mounted and people were taping them on little cheap tape recorders, and recordings of the plays were being passed around in the underground. And not entirely because of him, but as big way because of him, it set in motion one of the most peaceful revolutions in world history. And Havel himself went on to be the first democratically elected president of that country. And so then we come to 2007, and I'm in New York, and I hear about auditions for a Havel festival. They were going to do all of his plays. And I got cast playing the role that is, without a doubt, the most autobiographical role that he ever created. Most of the plot points of this character in a play called Audience. And the character that I played is essentially, the experiences are essentially identical to the experiences that he had as a dissident playwright. And someone said, Havel is going to be in New York while we're doing this. He's going to do a guest lecturer in residency at Columbia. And wouldn't it be cool if, Václav Havel showed up and saw the show? Well, we didn't really think that was likely to happen. So I get to the theater one night, and I'm walking down the block, and in front of the block there are 15 black SUVs, the Suburbans, with the tinted windshields and, bulletproof glass, and guys with, three-piece suits and sunglasses talking into their, shirt sleeves and earpieces on. And I thought, what the hell is going on? And he was there, and he saw the show. So I got to essentially play Václav Havel for an audience in New York that included Havel himself. And afterwards, we got to go out and have beers. We drank Czech beers together, and his English wasn't very good, but he had a translator with him. At one point, I said, can we take a picture? And he didn't quite follow what I was saying, and I said, take a photo. I said, and he goes, kind of points at himself like, with me? And I said, yeah, we take photo with Papa. And he just howled at that. He thought that was hilarious. And so we got to take a picture with him. It's one of my most prized possessions. He only passed just a few years back, in fact. But yeah, talk about a thing, man. Whoa. There's a moment in the play where the character comes to a pivotal point. He has to decide, is he going to do the right thing, which is probably going to be very bad for him, or is he going to do the wrong thing, which will probably be very good for him? And it's a moment of indecision, and I was blocked to stand downstage center close right. I mean, the first row of audience wasn't 3 feet from my face, and he was sitting right in front of me. To get to play that moment so close to him that I could hear him breathing. His energy was, I mean, he and I were in this energy bubble together, standing there. As far as a moment on stage that stands out for me, that's top of the list. It was an extraordinary experience.
Now, I think we can probably say that, leaving Vaclav Havel out of it, your first love as a playwright is perhaps someone who's a bit earlier, and that's Shakespeare.
I don't remember him not being in my life. Sunday mornings here in where I live, when I was a kid, there was a local Atlanta-based television network, and on Sunday mornings they ran something called Academy Award Theater. And they showed, obviously, films that had won Academy Awards, Best Pictures, but also Best Actors, or if it ever won an Academy Award, then it was shown. I don't remember. I couldn't have been 7, 8 years old, maybe. And they showed Olivier's Hamlet. And I just was transfixed. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I knew I wanted to. And that set in motion a lifelong love affair that has continued for me to this very day. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't pick up the canon and open it up and read something. And every time I do, I find something new in it. I directed Hamlet in 2002, and worked with a lot of those extraordinary people from Wilmington. And had been, just reading that play over and over and over and over again since I was very young. And still in the process of working with the actors, every single day of the rehearsal was a discovery. Something new was like, oh my God, how brilliant is he? But he has layered yet another tier of meaning here. Every time you pull back one, it opens up to a whole new vista of new depth and meaning. That play in particular is, that's as close to what I would call a gospel for me as anything. And it's the language, it's the poetry that he's working with, it's his extraordinary sense of humanity. 37 plays, and we're all in there. Every single one of us is in them plays. But more than that, I think it's just the fact that, and this is something that it's taken me really, I'm 54, and it's taken me until now to really fully appreciate this. He was not just interested in entertaining us. He wanted to make us better. He was interested in rewiring the human mind and soul to make us better people. I mean, he lived in a horrific time. The number one spectator sport of the day was bear baiting. You take a bear, you tie his leg with a length of rope to a stake, and then you take 2 starved, psychotic dogs, and you sit them on the tied up bear. Who's going to win, dogs or bear? That's the world he lived in. People dying in the streets. The city surrounded by spikes with, the heads of, people who committed various and sundry offenses. During a time when, if you were an actor, you couldn't be buried in sacred ground. Prostitutes could be buried in sacred ground. Actors could not. Despite all of that, he said, we can be better than this. We can be better people. And that's really what he's trying to do, I think, in all of his plays, is to say, we can evolve. We can evolve and become more than we are now and be better than we are now. And I completely agree. He was a rebel. He was borderline subversive, as a matter of fact, in a lot of things he was saying. In New York, I did Richard III, and I played the Hunchback himself. And he is Olivier played him with the makeup design was from the Tex Avery Big Bad Wolf cartoon. He's just a 2-dimensional bad guy on paper. But if you really stop and think about some of those things that he says, there's a different layer on which you can interpret some of those lines, where it's actually, I believe, Shakespeare is challenging the orthodox view of that aspect of his own country's history. Henry Tudor vanquished Richard III, which then set in motion the Tudor line. Shakespeare himself was still living under a Tudor monarchy, so he couldn't get away with just coming out and saying, look, this doesn't make any sense at all, but he's challenging it in clever, very subtle, subversive ways. There's a wonderful scene where Richard is seducing a woman whose husband and father-in-law he's already killed, and the scene begins with her ready to tear his head off, and by the end he's proposed marriage and she's thinking about it. And she goes wandering off the stage, and Richard turns to the audience and says, was ever woman in this fashion wooed? Was ever woman in this fashion won? And the way we always play that line is, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, did you see that? How good am I? What a performance I just gave, and she fell for it. But if you forget those preconceived ideas that we have about the delivery of the line and just look at the text, was ever a woman in this fashion wooed? Was ever a woman in this fashion won? What he's saying is, does this make any sense at all? That this actually happened this way? So he's doing these things throughout a lot of his plays. And he's very clever about how to walk that line to keep himself from being one of those, heads stuck on the stake surrounding the city. I admire him greatly because he thought higher of his audience than his audience thought of themselves. And that makes us more. He shows us a vision of ourselves that we go, well, why not? Why not be that way? So he's been with me from childhood on, and I continue to just love to work with his extraordinary language. It's a feast, and it just feels good coming out.
We'll come on to Shakespeare in Second Life in a bit. Zander, can you run on beyond 12 o'clock?
A little bit. I've got to be at the Children of Stories role play at 12:30, so I just need to have time to hop over there. You don't need to watch my demo reel on that. That's 7 minutes of your life you're never going to get back. It's there.
I think the audience would like to see it, though.
I'm happy to play it, but all right. But I'm following your lead here.
Okay, so I'm going to, have you all got the video set up? Can you all see it?
And we'll need to have our media volume turned up as well for this, as well as voice, I imagine.
Yeah. So I'm going to click the button, and away we go.
This is an old reel. It's showing its age, it's deteriorating. The original copy I had was on VCR. So it's got some pretty serious quality issues in the sound and the picture.
What do the others know about passion, huh, Tom? The passion that drives you to do something really, really nuts. So what difference does it make if one person more or less dies, huh? We all die, Tom. What matters is the act, not the family, Tom. Not the
headshot there sort of gives you a sense of why I got cast as a villain so often. I can never quite seem to get those big smiley commercial shots that you want if you want to do a Avis Rent-A-Car commercial or something like that. I can never get the headshot right for those. Those things to stick with what I knew I could do and work with, which was
You did quite a lot of dying, didn't you?
Oh my God, what's the line in the Fantastics? Die again, murder, die again. I did. I've been killed by some really extraordinary human beings, I'm proud to say, including James Earl. The one who put a bullet in me at the end of that one. The many deaths of Scott Simpson.
This is your work, so
I
personal.
think is on this reel if memory serves.
If you see the world in triangles, then go with it. Excellent work, Joey. You're coming along nicely. Sorry, this class is closed to wide-eyed visitors. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
I'm not sure if it's just me or...
you not to do that.
If I'd known the libations were this good, I'd have come to one of these weddings a long time ago.
Hope you don't expect me to drive with you in your condition.
I'd be happy to drop you off on the way home, Miss Maud.
Thank you, Lawrence. You certainly did a wonderful job resurrecting that old Bavarian clock.
What can I do for you?
I think you got something belonging to my aunt.
Miss Maud send you?
Yeah, she did. Where is it?
I hope you don't mind if I don't believe you. Now, if you fellas are thinking about selling Miss Maud's clock just to get yourself some drinking money, you got another fate coming.
And I believe you know Corporal Watts, one of your fellow spies.
We go way back.
Back to the beginning of the war.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, hi.
I presume you'd like a room.
That's generally why people stand at this desk, isn't it?
Would you like a single or a double bed, ma'am?
Interesting question. Double.
Well, that's fine. Because that's all we have is doubles.
Lucky me.
Get you a sign right there. Is there anything else that we can get for you this evening, ma'am?
It's Megan. What is with you people? I have a name, and it's Megan.
You know his name? Hello?
These altar boys here to get altered.
Y'all got the money?
Yeah. You got the illegal substance?
Oh, yeah.
It's there.
Oh,
Yes. That's it? That's all.
man, that's enough to melt an elephant.
Excuse my friend, he thinks he wants to melt 2 elephants.
Y'all want to smoke a roach?
Sure. Looks like a rat turd.
Tastes like what, too? So, tell me, where are you meeting Robinson?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm gonna ask you one more time. Where are you meeting Robinson?
You might as well pull that trigger. I've been on this earth a long time, and if Jesus feel fit to take
Don't
me,
you blaspheme his name.
Miss Rosa Washington, resident of the Sunnyside Rest Home. She still play bingo, does she? It's Thursday nights down at St. Mary's Church, isn't that right?
I'll take you to Robinson.
I thought you would. Shit! Damn drain pipe. I'm gonna send these guys through. You take the others, find where this lets out. Go on.
What about you?
I'm wearing a suit.
Oh, shit.
Okay, after that, I'm going to turn back briefly to Shakespeare, because I believe you did Shakespeare plays for summer stock.
I did, yes. In fact, my friend Michael Granberry, who I mentioned earlier, he and I started a summer Shakespeare festival in the mountains of northeast Georgia, foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Hang on. Stop. There we go. Yeah. Sorry, do go on.
Yeah, and so that we did that for, it's still, the festival itself is still going on to this day, but yeah, that was the first time, I've done Midsummer Night's Dream now 3 times, and that was the first time that I got to do Midsummer. I played Demetrius. And then, oh gosh, over the course of 6-7 years, I think we did about a dozen shows up there. That was an extraordinary time too, because it was a reunion for a lot of the people that I'd worked with in college. This was years after that, but we would all come back in the summertime and meet in this little community, arts community in the northeast Georgia mountains, and get to do Shakespeare. And then did some more Shakespeare as well in Wilmington, North Carolina. That was outdoor summer Shakespeare, and that was also a really great creative, exciting creative period as well.
And I believe you had a rather unexpected encounter when you were doing the outdoor Shakespeare.
Yeah, okay, so this is a story about the difference between being an actor in movies and being an actor in theater. But it's not the differences that you would think. In theater, you're pampered. I mean, they'll just, your feet don't even touch the ground. They, practically, escort you on the backs of porters and luggage back and forth, and it's, can we get you a sandwich, and what kind of mustard would you like? Theater, it's not quite as, you're not quite as mollycoddled. This production was on the banks, rather it was in a city park where there was a lake. Now, Wilmington is a peninsula with the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Cape Fear River on the other. And the lake was fed by branches off of the Cape Fear River. Consequently, the lake is brackish. It's part saltwater, part freshwater. The dressing room for this amphitheater was right down on the water's edge, and the backstage was about, not quite 75 meters, I would say. And even though it was summertime and it was still pretty light there at 8 p.m., there was such a huge overgrowth of canopy of trees over the walkway from the dressing rooms to the stage that it was pretty murky by that time. We'd have to have flashlights and just to sort of make sure that we were not getting our costumes muddy and whatnot as we made our way to the backstage area. There was an intercom in the dressing room, and the stage manager in the control room was sending us, cues for when to show up. And of course, you get the half hour to places, 15 minutes to places, 10, 5, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then finally the call for places. And so the stage manager calls for places, and we all tumble out of the dressing room, and we're stumbling in the dim light, and we flipped on a flashlight, and we could see eyes, like on the path up ahead of us. And slowly, as your eyes adjusted, you realize it was in my memory, he's like 25 feet long, but I probably was closer to 10 or 11 foot long, alligator, blocking the path between the dressing room and the backstage. And the stage manager is literally screaming over the intercom, places, 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 and we're standing there going, what in the world are we going to do? How do you convince an alligator that the show must go on? There's 20 of us, and we're utterly cowed by this prehistoric beast standing between us and them. And I don't know much about alligators, but I know they're carnivores. I was not particularly thrilled with the idea of trying to get around him, or certainly not with going through him. And so as a unit, we all just kind of started making noise and taking a step, and then making a bunch of noise and taking a step. I don't think so much out of fear as out of just sheer annoyance with the sounds that we were making. He finally turns and waddles off back towards the lake again. But yeah, that's the only time I can recall when a dinosaur more or less brought a play to a complete and sudden halt. And of course, the booth couldn't have cared less What do you mean there's an alligator? Just, deal with it and get your ass backstage. But there's not a whole lot of mollycoddling that goes on in theater.
Well, I'd like to turn now to the question of Second Life and acting in Second Life. And I've got a scene from Much Ado About Nothing, but it's probably a bit long now to show. So what I might do is just show the Hey Nonny song at the end, because that's everyone loves that.
That's fine.
What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the acting techniques and how they're different and how they're the same. Something with the way we made the Black and Mirror, we found that actually using Hollywood techniques was the best way forward.
Yep.
Having storyboards, setting up shots, and all of that sort of stuff. It worked. It works in real life, and it certainly worked in Second Life.
I think the thing that surprises me the most, now having done a bit of this, and there are people here who've done a lot more acting within the virtual space than I have, and what continues to sort of astonish me is not how it's different, but how it is essentially the same. Working with the avatar is something of a cross between a kind of digital puppetry work. It also has some elements that I always think remind me of what in theater we would call mask work, some sort of stylized use of masks. And when you're doing that, obviously you're losing one of the main tools that we as actors have to work with, which is just facial expression. The mask doesn't do that, so you have to compensate with a physicality that ramps up whatever you're feeling emotionally, because you don't have that to show the audience what's going on with the character emotionally. And in some ways, the avatars are still, even with all the great new things that we can now do with Bento, it's still the biggest limiting factor to doing theater or even machinima here in SL. So the people who are able to do it and do it really well, that I really admire, are able to, I think, bring something much like mask work to what is otherwise essentially digital puppetry. And then obviously we have the main tool that we're still left with as an actor, which is our voices. So it's voice acting, it's puppetry, it's mask work. And you're still a cast, you're still coming in and doing a show and telling a story. You still have a director who is that lighthouse guiding you into a safe harbor. There's so much more that acting in Virtua has in common with acting in the physical world than for all the differences. Those differences are minor, really, comparatively. I'm amazed by how powerfully we are able to connect with one another, just with friends and things, and events like, what we're going to be doing at 12:30 over in Amethyst Rift with the Children of Stories. Those things feel very real to me. My brain doesn't store and retrieve that memory that I'm going to create today, or this one that we're creating right now. It doesn't store that any differently than it does a memory I create in the physical world. So it's, I suppose in some levels, it's not that surprising that the connections that we're able to form with actors and the work that we're able to do with one another can be just as compelling and just as authentic as anything that certainly that I feel I've ever done in theater or film and television.
I certainly, looking back on things that we've done, I do see it in that kind of way. But yes, it was real.
Yes.
And it certainly took us a hell of a lot of hours to get the things we wanted.
Another thing that absolutely, that's another thing that's 100% exactly like making a movie in the physical world. It's astonishing how much time it takes to capture successfully a very small amount of time. When I'm doing audio, I figure if it takes me an hour for every minute of runtime for the finished product, I'm doing pretty good. When you're making a movie, it can be 5-10 times that. And we had some days on Black and Mirror where it was it was a struggle. It was hours and hours to try to just get one moment. But when that moment is critical, then that's what you have to do.
The one that stands out strongest in my memory is walking down the street in Seraph City.
Yes.
The scenario there was that Quinn, the hero, played by Zander, had lost his temper, stormed out of the cafe bar, walked down, had a brief argument with Alice Allen, the heroine, and then stormed off, walked down the street towards his office. She followed him, trying to stop him, and she finally said something that really, really freaked him out. He stopped dead. He turned and confronted her, Mr. Biggins, and in the background, Edward Pierce. That was about, 30 seconds?
Maybe.
45 seconds
maybe,
at most?
If that, yep.
And it took us
finished runtime, yes.
8 hours to film that.
Yep, you don't have to worry about airplanes flying overhead or emergency vehicles or a sudden thunderstorm, but, what is lag if not bad weather? It's just, there's so many things that have to go right. I was a huge critic of I would go see movies and, well, that wasn't very good, and this was, could have been better, and let me tell you something, making movies really knocked me off my high horse. I came out of doing my first film thinking, it's a miracle this ever works. It's not surprising that there's not more good stuff. What's surprising is that there's any good stuff.
That it happens at all, yes.
Yeah, that it happens at all is an absolute miracle. And it's not a miracle, it's because people who care about doing a good job work very, very hard. And, acting is tough. I'm not going to diminish the difficulty of doing that and doing it well, but nothing comes close to the difficulty of a crew's jobs. What they do overall is 50 times harder than what any of us as actors are being asked to do. And they do it 14, 16-hour days. And then to come into Second Life and find, it's just no different. The more complicated, the more bits and pieces a single moment has, the more difficult it is for all of those things that have to go right, and you actually capture it on film. Now, the great joy of it is also the same as you have in the physical world. Once you have captured it, you have something that lasts forever. And that's something that film has, that theater doesn't, that I really love, that I really am very grateful for. I look back at my theater work and I think, I know what happened because I was there. People who saw it know it happened because they were there. Anybody else, it's not even a memory for them. So there's this ephemeral thing with live theater, and film is a way to sort of be able to turn back and say, point to it and say, that I did this. This is a mark that I have left behind. So the things that are challenging about it are the same as the things that are challenging about it in the physical world, and the things that are really a glorious blessing about it are also the same as well.
You talked about earlier about your real life career on radio, but you also, I'm going to jump back into that for a moment because I then want to come back into voice work in Second Life. You also did some acting as voiceover work, which some people may have seen.
And again, this is one of those things that, who would have ever believed it? In Wilmington, North Carolina, during my years there were 3 different recording studios that were doing English language adaptations of Japanese animation. And there was a time there when I was going from one studio and then I'd wrap and I'd go right straight to one of the others and do something different over there. And man, I loved doing that work. Just loved it. You're in the studio under the headphones with a microphone in front of you. There's a big monitor hanging on the wall in front of you, and you're watching the animation. So you're providing the vocal component that reinforces the physical choices that essentially the director and writer and animator have made. I always said it's like egoless acting. Because it's not about your process. It's not about, I'm going to go where the character leads me, my muse is telling me to go, no, it's not about that. The performance has already been given, and your job is to come in and provide a vocal element that reinforces that physical performance that's on the screen. But you can't, you're getting to be an actor in a cartoon and you're doing it live. It's an amazing experience. I also got to do a lot of parts that I would never be cast for on stage or film, ever. Parts that physically I'm just not right for. But I got to do, all kinds of young, naive, cute hero boys. Nobody's ever going to cast me as that, even when I was young and, as close to cute as I was ever going to get. That's not a part that I would have ever been cast as. So there again, it was in a different medium. Suddenly you're able to access different aspects of what you do as an actor. And I loved that. I got to go to a lot of conventions during those years, meet other amazing voice actors, do voice actor panels, talk with the people who love that medium. I loved it, still do. I loved the show that we are best known for, that I'm best known for, is one called, the Japanese name is Amagami-sama. Translation is "Oh!" exclamation point, my goddess, exclamation point. And I play a young, kind of naive, sweet kid who has an actual goddess drop into his life and becomes his girlfriend. At the time, I was married to the actress who played the goddess, and people would say, do you relate to this character at all? And I said, well, I'm kind of a geeky nerd who's, has the blessing of being with a girl who is just way out of his league in terms of how beautiful she is. So yeah, I do relate to this character a lot. And Juliet Cesario plays Belle Dandy, and that's phenomenal performance, and remains just one of my dearest people in my world and in my heart. And Juliet, I'll let you in on this, all of those Fantasy Faire Radio IDs that you hear, you're listening to Fantasy Faire Radio, that's Juliet Cesario, the voice of Belle Dandy, Oh My Goddess. So again, a chance to bring some people that I just adore and have worked with into the fair and give them a place to be here as well. So she probably actually gets more airtime on FF4 than I do. So that is kind of cool. Love the anime work.
There was another of your friends who is rather well known who came in and helped us with the Black Mirror.
Wow, this is another one that dropped into my world out of nowhere, and I stood there for the better part of years, just couldn't believe my luck. Peter Jurasik, the actor, he's best known for Londo Molinari on Babylon 5, but this man has been, if you look at his whole resume, there's not a television show that aired between like 1970 and 1990 that he doesn't have big, awesome parts on. One of my favorites when I was a kid, Hill Street Blues. I loved that show, and he played Sid the Snitch in Hill Street Blues. Peter moved to Wilmington, walked up and introduced himself and said, I hear you're somebody that an actor in this town would want to know. And it set in motion a friendship that I'm just so proud to say continues to this day. And so when we were doing a radio drama adaptation of a Black and Mirror story, there was a great part in it, not unlike his character Sid the Snitch from Hill Street Blues. So Peter came in and did that with us, and I'm happy to say that he had such a great time that there's something else in the works coming up, and I hope we have it ready for you guys in time for Fantasy Faire next year. And I would say it's a pretty good chance that Peter Jurasik is going to be playing a big role in that. Hopefully something to look forward to. He was amazing. He just is an incredible human being. The guy was in Tron, accounting subroutine, first game that our hero gets thrown into. He refuses to deal the killing blow, and so the master program drops him. That was Peter as accounting subroutine. That alone would have, and I'd have been starstruck from that alone. But just the sheer volume of what he's done is astonishing. And I agree, Judy. What he does with Londo in that show, it's amazing. That's a totally invented accent that he has there. And you can sort of dissect it and hear the elements. There's an Eastern European element. There's, I would say, almost a Welsh element to it as well. It's a real mishmash of sounds and tones, and he's so consistent throughout the whole thing. It's not like it, starts off iffy and gets better. He hits the ground from the first episode, and he's just there in that role, and I think it makes a big difference. It is awful hair. He said he had a love-hate relationship with the hair. It took him a while, but he did come to eventually love the hair. It's a bold choice.
You know how sometimes a single scene will stick in your memory?
Yes.
The scene where Londo confronts Car.
Yeah.
When he's being tortured.
Yes.
It's the kind of sickening realization that this is what all his plotting and scheming has led to, that someone who has in a way been his friend and enemy is being tortured. That was... Yeah, okay, this is geeky, sorry.
Well, he's somebody that gets my inner fanboy geek fired up as well. I'll just send a quick message to let the Children's Stories know that I will be there in a matter of moments. I will have to dash here in just a moment, but
okay.
To get to the working thing, that's awesome, but to get to go and have dinner in his home and go to Christmas parties at his house, and he has a beautiful, brilliant wife. He has an extraordinary son. I count them as family in my world as well, and that's another thing that working together in these mediums enables us to do, which is really just transcend the work and connect on a profound emotional level with one another in ways that just bond you to people with hoops of steel. And I'm proud to say that Peter is just one of my dearest and most beloved friends in the world.
Well, yeah, we've got to come to an end now, and it's such a shame because there are stories I know you have that we haven't had time to touch on, but that means that you'll just have to come back next year.
That's right. And Judy is correct. Andreas Katsoulis was a victim of cancer, and it's why Peter has stepped in and helped with some Fantasy Faire tasks that I've had for him as well, because it's deeply personal to him as well. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you so much for being Fairlanders and for being by our side, all of us together. We're gonna wake up one day to a news report that says it's done, the job has been done, and it will have been done in large part because of people like you, like us, working together. You're heroes in my heart, and I just couldn't thank you enough for being here today. I was nervous. I was nervous about this. Why would anybody want to come hear this? But here you are.
Okay.
You're a blessing. You're just all such a blessing. Thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
And
come see us in Amethyst Rift.
Yes, and I think people are very excited about what you've let a hint out of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
This is where I go to Elizabeth and say the words she dreads hearing most.
Yes.
Saffia and I were talking, and